He was dismissed for being deemed non-combatant and labeled as useless by his colleagues. However, the truth was that the entire academy depended entirely on him. Once he left, their renowned inventions ceased functioning entirely. Meanwhile, a researcher they had expelled casually revealed S-rank magic as if it were mere pastime. Now, a princess, a dragon girl, and a host of geniuses gathered around him, questioning who had been truly ineffective all along. Using only a small amount of magical energy, these items enhanced daily life, proving useful even to those with minimal magical ability who cannot perform magic themselves. From humble homes to the royal palace, these innovations have played a vital role in the nation's prosperity. These creations are known as magical artifacts, and their developers are called artificer mages. One of the senior figures told him he should pay attention to what was being said, then announced he was not required to come to work the next day. Werner Streit, an associate professor at the Sage Academy, asked if he was taking a vacation. The reply was blunt. He had already been told he was fired. The other found the situation baffling and exclaimed that he still behaved like an idiot. The academy's director then questioned the reason for the firing, noting how astonishing it was that even he didn't understand. He explained that the Sage Academy was a prestigious scientific institution dedicated solely to developing magical artifacts. Despite this, he had been spending too much time on research and training students who, in his view, were quite unremarkable. Werner considered that the ongoing delays stemmed from being assigned routine tasks and believed that students with poor grades had nonetheless made respectable progress. The director declared that he had managed to overlook these issues until now, but that period had ended. The founder of the academy, who had always protected him, was no longer present. He then revealed the magical artifacts, those relics once belonging to the academy, including all designs and patents, and was returning the remaining junk. He implied that he could live as he pleased, if he survived at all in the royal capital. After this, Werner turned and left. The dean, observing, said that it was just as well that Bohr only irritated him. They were rid of him now. The dean of the Magical Artifacts Department mentioned that they had obtained valuable research materials and artifacts and no longer needed him. Of course, he declared that he himself would be registered as the second creator of these magical artifacts. He further stated that only the founder and himself had been obstacles, and with them gone, the academy was now entirely under their control. His command was clear: continue and finalize the development of their creations. He responded according to his own wishes. He claimed that 3 days would suffice for his geniuses to finish their work, after which they would be dismissed. He then announced that he had to leave, citing orders from the Academy of Sages, which also meant that the premises were no longer rented to him. He explained that, by the Academy's command, they could not sell him goods. She was outraged, asserting that according to the same order, they couldn't even give him money. She warned him not to return at all. Warren felt that all the places where he had maintained good relations had now turned their backs on him. He suspected that the director had already arranged everything behind his back. He realized he had almost nothing left and saw no choice but to go himself to that mysterious place. Behind him, a group of people argued among themselves. But what had he done? This was a special order from His Highness, the Crown Prince. If his work wouldn't be ready for tomorrow's ceremony, he had carefully packed everything. Why? To ensure it would be ready in time. The MC approached and inquired what damage had been caused by the fall. The parts seemed intact, but suddenly he declared that he needed to stop. He warned that no one should touch it without permission because it was a complex magical artifact. Damage from careless handling could be severe. He then proceeded to say that everything was already fixed. He had repaired it on the spot. The MC was surprised and asked, "What?" The reply was negative. Repairing it that quickly was impossible. Instead, the MC placed his hand on the ground and managed to restore all other items simultaneously. Moreover, he enhanced the efficiency of the magical energy consumption. This astonished everyone. He assured them that everything was truly repaired. Then, he fell to his knees before Werner and expressed gratitude. Though he didn't know who Werner was, he insisted that Werner had saved their lives. He asked if he could somehow thank him, The MC then asked if Werner could give him a ride in his carriage since he had a destination in mind. They agreed and took Werner along. The MC believed they were headed toward the Stride estate, the noble family responsible for the country's military affairs, his home. Werner's father and brother wanted him to become a soldier, but he chose to defy their wishes and pursue a career as an artifact mage. Werner exhaled silently, knowing that if they discovered he'd been expelled from the academy, they would force him into military service. He knew he must hide himself carefully and leave immediately, taking only what was necessary. The MC slipped through a window, deep in thought. At the very least, his personal belongings should have been left behind. He hoped he could reach the corner in time and escape unnoticed. Just then, she approached him, saying they hadn't seen each other in a long while. He turned to look at her. She noted that since he left home, he hadn't even bothered to write a letter. Werner called out to her, and she responded, "And now he's sneaking around like a thief. He needs to go to her room right away." Birgit added that this morning, a letter had arrived from Teacher K, the first director of the academy. Biscaltus in Rome on Birgit Street was where she said she already had a rough understanding of what had transpired. It made sense that he avoided involvement with his father and brother, yet she couldn't understand why he hadn't told her directly. The main character could not meet her gaze and simply apologized, explaining that he didn't want to cause her any additional trouble. She looked at him with a mixture of patience and mild annoyance, then declared, "Enough with the lecture." She handed him a letter from Teacher K, emphasizing that it was important he receive it. Perhaps there was something in that letter that might be of help to him. Werner took the letter and read it aloud to his beloved student. She was likely concerned that he had left the academy without explanation, but there was no reason to worry. Currently, she was relaxing in a hot spring in a nearby village. She had retired due to persistent lower back pain and decided to buy a house with hot springs to enjoy the rest of her days. However, her story wasn't the focus now. If he was reading this message, it meant he'd probably already been expelled from the academy. She had once proposed him as her successor, but knowing the old man's nature, he probably found some excuse to dismiss him. Yet she thought that perhaps this was for the best. It was better for him to pursue research that truly fascinated him. While he could never surpass her in skill, her greatest student had already created countless groundbreaking magical artifacts, proving his immense talent must not go to waste. The main character called his teacher and continued to read the letter. He was advised to concentrate on his research and deepen his studies into the sciences. If he lacked a suitable workspace, she offered him her old laboratory in the wilderness. Most importantly, she urged him to remember these words. She was a greater genius, and he should remain humble and keep striving to improve. Werner considered her words and noted that she still possessed her characteristic daring. He thought about the research he loved, funding his projects and securing a comfortable place to gather materials. It would also be wise to find a capable assistant, someone who could share the workload. Ultimately, what mattered most was creating an environment where he could pursue his studies peacefully. Once he decided on his next steps, the first thing to do was to build that very laboratory. She looked at him and remarked that the old Werner she remembered had finally come back. Despite all his father's reproaches, he had chosen to walk the path of a magical artifact creator. Her eyes shone with hope as she saw the dream still alive within him, exactly the spark she admired. She called to him, assuring him that even if no one understood his passion, he shouldn't worry. She would always be there for him. If he faced difficulties, he could turn to her without hesitation. Werner thanked her and announced he was leaving. She wished him luck. 2 days later, the main character arrived at the house her teacher had mentioned. He had finally succeeded in establishing a large research facility out in the wilderness, just as Teacher K had envisioned. Now it was time to begin his work. As he was about to step inside, his attention was drawn aside by the sight of a girl running from a monster, screaming in terror. Werner wondered if it was the legendary ancient dragon, as such creatures appeared very rarely. Then, he looked at the creature's head, pondering what might be unfolding in this unexpected encounter. The next instant, the dragon surged forward, intent on attacking the girl, but Werner swiftly stepped in front of her, instinctively shielding her from the blow. He remarked that he had never seen such a sophisticated magical device before and needed a closer look. Even from a distance, it was difficult to discern details, as his vision was somewhat obscured. A strange suppression of consciousness seemed to be at play, an unnatural influence suggesting the device was under someone's remote control. Yet, there were subtle irregularities in the device's manipulation of the dragon's left side, indicating room for refinement. The dragon launched another attack on the main character. Werner observed that the left side was indeed reacting sluggishly. Acting quickly, he grabbed the girl and dodged the strike. He then stated that he now comprehended the device's overall structure. The main character jumped onto the dragon, tearing off an amulet from its head. In the aftermath, the girl looked at Werner in astonishment. He explained that the malfunction was caused by a particular issue, and if he repaired it here, everything should operate smoothly again. Nonetheless, he believed that this force-controlling feature was ultimately an obstacle. The girl attempted to call out to the main character, wondering if that was really him. Werner, meanwhile, speculated that the control mechanism directly affected the nervous system. His repair was now complete. A multi-frequency therapeutic device was ready for use. It would relax muscles and soothe the nervous system, alleviating shoulder strain and lower back pain, possibly useful for Teacher K and her troublesome lower back. At that moment, the girl stared at the main character with wide-eyed surprise. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the director demanded to know what on earth he was doing. Hadn't he completed even a single magical artifact? It had already been a week. The dean, burdened with frustration, pondered how Werner managed to create such an advanced device. Despite reviewing all of Werner's research materials multiple times, he couldn't grasp the meaning behind them. How was Werner able to develop this technology? Did he even fully understand the underlying theories? Or was he simply lucky? Werner had been working on similar projects far longer than he had. Without realizing it, both the dean and the girl simultaneously asked aloud, "Who is he?" Werner explained that an additional power switch artifact was necessary. An unconscious, yet essential, component to start the device. Klaus, the prince of the Linfelden Empire, wondered if Werner had been expelled from the academy. The news of his dismissal had spread even among the Empire's highest elites. They considered it a grave loss to lose such a talented artifact mage. Klaus believed that many failed to appreciate the gravity of the situation. The outcome of this technological breakthrough could decide the Empire's fate. He argued that Werner's expulsion was a mistake. Although Werner was not an offensive mage like true artificers, he was a master of magical tools. Remember how that civil war had ended? Over 100% of the rebels had been defeated by a new type of magical bomb, leading to victory. The mastermind behind that weapon was none other than a 12-year-old Werner. Klaus revealed that the bomb was originally engineered to extract ore from underground mines. When tested, its immense power surfaced, capable of tearing through obstacles that only a barrier made by dozens of court mages could contain. It would have been manageable if creating such weapons was the only concern, but this individual demonstrated magic of an identical magnitude without any explosive devices, doing so 100 times. He was an incredibly powerful mage, one capable of annihilating an entire country if he chose to do so. Under no circumstances should he be provoked, as he currently maintained a friendly attitude toward their nation. Unaware of the surrounding rumors, the protagonist headed toward the royal capital. At the main gate, guards blocked his way, claiming this was the sacred royal entrance, protected by proud sentinels tasked with safeguarding the city. Such suspicious company, they insisted, was forbidden entry. The protagonist felt unprepared. Had he been in the academy's carriage or at his home, admission would have been easy. His eagerness to begin his research now clashed with the unexpected obstacle he faced. A woman approached him and asked if his name was Werner. Her name was Charlotte, and she expressed gratitude for his earlier help. She inquired if he knew Master K, the master of magical tools. Werner confirmed his acquaintance, explaining he was no longer in the city. Charlotte was surprised and asked whether he had left. Werner responded negatively. She pressed further, asking if that was all. He then explained she was probably at the hot springs at that moment. He told her she wouldn't be able to become an apprentice now, which deeply upset her, causing her to kneel and ask what she should do. Werner suggested she consider the School of Magical Artifacts, the Academy of Sages, which was well equipped with the latest technology, an ideal place for her studies. He warned, however, that not everyone there was friendly. If she wished, he could write her a letter of recommendation, as he had good ties with the teachers. Hearing this, Charlotte's face lit up with hope. She clasped his hand, exclaiming that it was wonderful and thanking him profusely. Realizing she was wounded and vulnerable, Werner suggested it was dangerous for her to wander the city alone. They decided to head toward the royal capital together. However, when Charlotte showed her ID at the gate, the guard instantly laughed and pointed at her, dismissing it as a counterfeit without needing to check. She insisted her ID was genuine. The guard dismissed her assertion, claiming all fakes talked like that and needed to turn back immediately. Charlotte grabbed his arm, pleading with him to scrutinize her documents more carefully. She urgently needed to get inside. Frustrated, the guard attempted to seize her, claiming she was interfering with his duties, but Werner intervened just in time, managing to rescue her from the situation. He explained to the guard that checking documents was not his duty, urging him to stop judging hurriedly. A thorough inspection was necessary, if, of course, the guard considered himself a proud gatekeeper. However, the guard was angered and insisted that, regardless of appearances, their suspicious items were fake, and he would arrest them for counterfeiting. The protagonist dodged the guard's aggression and suggested that, if his distrust stemmed from dirt on the items, he could simply use magic to clean them. Werner then summoned water with his magic, thoroughly cleaning everything. Afterward, he declared, "Now all the dirt is removed." She inspected the items and confirmed they were indeed clean. The protagonist gave a nervous cough and nodded, signaling they could proceed. Suddenly, the commander approached, inquiring about the commotion. The guard explained that he had misunderstood the situation. He then pointed at Werner and accused them of attempting to pass through with forged documents. They resisted, forcing the guard to turn them back. The commander listened carefully and asked if the documents were indeed counterfeit. Charlotte was instructed to present her identification. She handed over her ID, and the commander examined it, recognizing that forging official papers was a serious crime. Reading the details, he acknowledged its authenticity and, in a surprising display of courtesy, bowed and apologized for his earlier rudeness. He then ordered the gate to be opened without delay. The guard questioned why, and the commander sternly reminded them how daring they had been. Both were to face severe punishment. Turning to Charlotte, he offered to escort her in a carriage. However, the protagonist sensed she no longer needed such assistance. He handed her a letter of recommendation, informing the guard that she was to be sent to the Academy of Sages. The guard agreed. Werner advised her to study diligently, and she expressed gratitude with a bow before departing. 5 days later, he announced that his task for today was complete. The protagonist believed he had nearly finished the device, needing only to test its strength now. Suddenly, a knock sounded at the door. Werner wondered who it could be at such an hour, in the middle of nowhere. Cautiously, he opened the door and saw a girl resembling a dragon standing before him. She declared she had finally met him, implying she thought she would never see her master again. Without warning, she threw herself into his arms, embracing him tightly. Confused, the protagonist wondered who she was. At that moment, a servant remarked that the visitor at the main gate was undoubtedly a student from Kay's academy. He suggested that she might be connected to the hermit they had pursued for many years. The leader was pleased, seeing a chance to finally eliminate the hermit, an opportunity they had long desired. Regarding the magical artifacts of the academy, the servant reported that progress was slow. Their current focus was on granting wishes in exchange for relics left by the former director, Kay. The leader was filled with outrage. Did they truly not recognize his worth? They needed to understand whom they were challenging. Perhaps instead of waiting for the fruits of their efforts, they should simply take everything he had built from his secluded refuge. The servant suggested that, if that were the case, he should handle it himself. The leader, however, refused, deeming such an unskilled man unworthy of the task, especially since he had returned empty-handed from capturing the student. Suddenly, he turned and noticed someone approaching. He asked what was happening. In the next moment, a girl pierced his body with a sharp blow. She declared that the Order of Light had no place for the weak. As for the apprentice, she would leave him to her. She was confident she would surpass all expectations. The leader acknowledged her fighting spirit, but reminded her that their base housed a new kind of magical bomb, crafted by the despised hermit. That very weapon had once destroyed over 100 of their allies. Her confidence raised a question. How did she intend to confront such a lethal device? She reassured him boldly, saying they shouldn't worry. If 100 fighters were insufficient, she would mobilize 300 elite warriors. Success was certain in her mind. He chuckled, agreeing covertly, and emphasized that they must seize the magical artifacts and eliminate the hermit's disciple, all in accordance with a prophecy. Meanwhile, Hadi was joyfully embracing Werner. The main character asked her who she was. She responded cryptically, "I see. The master only recognizes this form." She then beckoned him closer, prompting curiosity about her identity. Werner wondered who this striking, naked woman could be. She stepped back and revealed herself as the ancient dragon Hadi. In a flash, she transformed into a massive, majestic dragon. The main character mused internally, "So that's her true form." Hadi explained that dragons held a code. They always repay kindness. She had been under control when Werner saved her, and in gratitude, she committed to serve him for life. He told her she need not bother, but she insisted loudly that if she returned without repaying her debt, her entire family would shame her. Werner thought her words were a bit dramatic. Suddenly, she asked if it was her imagination or if an unpleasant odor was in the air. She explained that the light steam operation was about to begin, and she intended to assist him by cleaning everything thoroughly. She then offered to bathe him. The main character remarked that dragons didn't seem particularly modest. She seemed to take this in stride, transforming into a small dragon and offering her help during her service in that form. He firmly declined, reiterating that he didn't need her assistance. She was disappointed, claiming she could be useful, flying over clouds, unleashing mighty balls of fire. She expressed her desire to stay by his side. Looking at her gentle face, Werner thought to himself that she appeared sincere and genuinely eager to help. He gently patted her on the head and said, "So be it." She asked if he would permit her to serve him, and he responded affirmatively. She then embraced him warmly, expressing her gratitude. MC informed her that she needed to assist him swiftly with a crucial task. He had just called, reporting that the army was fully prepared and ready to strike at a moment's notice. Halus remarked on their incredible speed and praised their efficiency. He was a junior commander in the Order of Divine Light, known for moving with lightning-fast precision. Her motto was clear. With all her strength and speed, she would eliminate enemies instantly, launching simultaneous attacks from all sides. She rallied her forces, declaring that they would sacrifice K's disciple at dawn's first light. All responded unanimously, expressing their readiness to act with utmost speed and strength. One of them, half laughing loudly, garnered attention. He called her over, asking about the scout reports. An individual emerged from a nearby house, presumably K's student, accompanied by some mysterious creature. It seemed they hadn't yet been detected. She laughed softly, observing that the student had carelessly left his base unguarded. How convenient. She judged the student to be relatively weak and believed that if they decided to, they could crush him easily, especially along with his strange pet. She raised her hand and swiftly altered their plan, telling the army to prepare for a new attack. Everyone, clearing their throats, was ordered to ready themselves for battle, to assault with all their strength and speed. They shouted a unified declaration to break their enemies into pieces, then set out to attack her house. Werner confided in Hadi, expressing his trust in her abilities. Hadi soared into the sky, asking if she was truly permitted to attack. MC signaled his agreement with a subtle hand gesture. Werner then announced the need to activate the barrier and added that a dragon was circling above. She was instructed to slay the dragon, then pursue the student, covering both with as much magical force as possible. At that moment, Hadi unleashed a blazing fireball directed at the airborne threat. Haz, observing this, asked, "What?" Without hesitation, Hadi released even more fireballs, commanding herself to intensify the attack. She then turned her fire upon the army below, her magical balls knocking some soldiers down. Halfaz shouted in disbelief, "This can't be!" After defeating Halfaz's forces, Werner confirmed that the test was complete. Hadi reverted to her small dragon form, releasing a satisfied exhale, expressing how happy she was. She then praised MC, calling him very cool. Warren looked at her thoughtfully and questioned whether she truly thought so. He considered how he only needed to adjust her size in the lab. Just then, he thought he heard something unusual. Eugene approached, reporting that everything was proceeding as planned. They appeared to be testing a new magical artifact. MC called him over to clarify. Hadi turned to Werner, asking who Eugene was, as the scene settled into a moment of quiet anticipation. MC explained he was a member of the Merchant Guild and had assisted him during his time at the academy. Eugene, holding a small box, mentioned hearing from his sister that he now lived nearby, prompting him to visit and propose a deal on enchanted devices. Werner replied thoughtfully that while the offer sounded appealing, it might be faster to purchase such items directly from the academy in the royal capital. Eugen expressed his long-standing admiration for the magical instruments he had crafted, noting that since his departure, their quality had noticeably declined. Everything at the academy seemed to be in a quite poor state. As he spoke, the man suddenly shattered an artifact prepared by the academy's dean. At that moment, the academy's director looked at him with visible disappointment. While the dean was filled with terror, beads of sweat ran down his face. Harold, the Merchant Guild leader cooperating with the academy, approached the dean of the Sages Institution, clutching an object and shaking it before him. He declared, "So, the device they're unveiling is a water-heating magic artifact. Is that correct?" The dean nodded in confirmation. Harold, in a tone laced with sarcasm, replied that they had other inventions as well, all of which were of excellent quality, worth pride. "Pride!" he echoed mockingly. Then he casually tossed the device to the ground, shattering it instantly into small fragments. The dean exclaimed in confusion, "What is he doing?" Harold's reply was equally derisive. If that was the esteem held for their mass-produced items which had been cosmetically modified, then they might as well go along with it. The merchant leader discarded everything he held in his hand, smashing the remaining artifacts, and declared that all such magical objects were worthless trash. The dean turned pale with fear, overwhelmed by Harold's fury. Gerald added that he had previously helped to exile Dr. K's student and had made substantial donations to the academy, all for the sake of promoting the magical tools of a genius who had advanced the field by 8 centuries. He fixated his gaze on the dean and questioned, was it part of their contract to grant exclusive rights to Professor K's magical devices? The dean froze, unable to move or speak. Gerald continued, the contract clearly states that failure to fulfill obligations results in punishment. That is the rule among merchants. His subordinates seized the dean, and the old man began to beg for mercy, pleading to be spared. Observing Gerald, the dean cried out in fear, questioning what his plans might be. The merchant leader drew a liquid from a syringe and told the academy director, they will pay for their failures with their bodies. We expect them to serve us well. Meanwhile, Eugene approached the protagonist, offering an envelope. He explained that he had received a letter from Professor K before arriving here. The professor indicated it was meant for Mr. Werner, prompting Eugene to come with it. The protagonist took the envelope with surprise, pondering the arrival of yet another message. In her message, Kay addressed her treasured pupil, Werner. The teacher expressed her hope that he had already completed his work on the protective barrier and was beginning to consider designing his own laboratory. She also shared that she had established her own research space on an island in the southern seas, which felt almost like a vacation. Building such a facility would require a significant budget, but since Werner lacked connections with merchant guilds, it would be wiser for him to sell magical instruments to Mr. Eugene. Kay mentioned that she had one particular favor to ask, something Werner should remember when he leaves their current location. Eugene later inquired about what the professor had written. Werner responded thoughtfully, explaining that she was asking him to craft and sell magical devices. When Eugene saw Werner's creation, he asked, "Is this a magical protective barrier?" Amazement clear in his voice. Could such a small device truly generate such a shield? Werner activated the device, increasing its defensive power 100 times, and claimed he could make the barrier even larger. Eugene's eyes widened in astonishment. The barrier extended over more territory than the city's immense protective dome. Werner added that mass production would be challenging at this stage. Still, he believed that widespread use of such magical tools would benefit society. Eugene agreed, acknowledging the device's attractiveness even now, and requested permission to sell it. Soon after, Eugene asked if he could visit Werner's shop to finalize a deal. The protagonist replied that he would head there once he completed his teacher's assignment. They shook hands, agreeing to meet in the royal capital. When Eugene departed, Hachi waved him off. The protagonist then declared that he was about to get to work. Hallis, barely able to move, muttered that Professor K's student would not let this go easily. No matter how hard Hallis tried, she couldn't outmatch her opponent. And if she returned empty-handed, she wouldn't be forgiven. From the window of her house, she observed the protagonist's residence and joyfully exclaimed that it seemed like they were heading somewhere. Waiting until the protagonist and Hachi had moved out of sight, Hallis slipped inside through a window. Even if she couldn't defeat them in combat, she knew she had to bring back some tangible results. As she looked around, she realized the house was empty. Hoping the hermit wasn't present, she scanned the shelves and found identical objects she recognized. New bombs with numerous assemblies. Hallis happily picked up one and exclaimed, "Those new bombs and so many of them!" As she continued her survey, she noticed stacks of scribbled papers. She called out, "These are blueprints! What luck!" If she could take these documents along with a few more notes, her failure might be excused. She also discovered testing records for a new explosive. The reports stated that over 100 insurgents had been eliminated on the Empire's frontier. However, they also highlighted safety concerns regarding the device's use in mining operations. Professor K was considering adding a remote control device designed and developed by Werner Stritt. Halfus reflected briefly before exclaiming, "Impressive. Though he's only the professor's apprentice, his combat skills are remarkable. Now it all makes sense. He's the hermit, the inventor of the new bomb, the one who had been obstructing their plans for so long, the cult's main enemy." Her long-standing mystery was finally solved. If she could uncover his true identity, her promotion would be assured, paving the way for her to become the cult's leader. In her dreams, she envisioned herself on the throne, with loyal followers bowing before her. She chuckled with satisfaction at the thought of what lay ahead. Suddenly, the bomb triggered a series of characteristic beeps, and the device she held announced that the detonator had been activated. Simultaneously, the other bombs lining the shelves began to beep as well. Their detonators live. In disbelief, she exclaimed, "Are they joking?" Meanwhile, the protagonist, having retreated to a safe distance, watched his house as he recalled the professor's instructions. Kay had notified him before leaving the laboratory, emphasizing that if the bombs fell into the wrong hands, it could be disastrous. He had advised adding a remote detonator to the new bombs and activating them to destroy the lab before departure. Confused by the sudden chaos, Hallis looked around anxiously as the bombs vibrated ominously. An enormous explosion erupted, and the protagonist confirmed that the detonation had succeeded. Hachi, surprised, exclaimed, "So it worked." The protagonist then told his pet that they needed to head for Eugene. On the way, he considered their priorities. First, negotiating with the merchant guild about the barrier and choosing a location for their new laboratory. He also had to talk to his sister, There was much to do, but he accepted it willingly for the sake of perfect research. Hachi assured him she would help, and he activated her initial form, transforming her into a massive flying dragon, thanking her for agreeing to assist. She replied nonchalantly, "Piece of cake." Werner Stritt mentioned that their destination was the capital. After arriving, the protagonist was greeted by the Imperial Crown Prince Klaus von Linfelden, who sarcastically remarked that within less than a week, he had constructed the barrier, defeated an ancient dragon, making it his servant, and destroyed the laboratory to arrive here. The prince joked that, next time, he should avoid flying on a dragon to prevent frightening the citizens. Grateful for his return, he introduced the protagonist to a lady he wanted him to meet. The girl entered the room with a bright smile, joyfully addressing him by name and expressing her gratitude, saying she hadn't properly thanked him during their last encounter. With a gentle smile, she added, "Thank you so much for last time." The protagonist looked at her in surprise, questioning, "Who is she?" The princess immediately grew faint, glancing at him with confusion and realizing he had forgotten her. Claus cleared his throat and expressed his surprise that they knew each other but found it fitting. He then asked the main character if he was familiar with the neighboring kingdom of Lament. Recently, the Galatea Empire had been secretly plotting to annex it. In response, an alliance of advanced magical technologies was formed, and the princess was invited to study enchanted artifacts. On her way to meet Professor K, her future mentor, Charlotte was ambushed by bandits, who murdered all her guards. The protagonist had managed to save her when she was alone. As he leisurely sipped his tea, he reflected, "It's been a tough journey for her." The prince continued explaining that, during an interrogation of the captured bandits, it emerged that they were loyal to the Empire and possessed magical artifacts crafted at the Sage Academy. While studying at the Academy had once seemed the best choice for Charlotte, the threat of internal betrayal made it now too risky. Consequently, Prince Laus, wanted the protagonist to take the princess as his apprentice. The girl exclaimed in astonishment, "An apprentice?" Claus nodded. "Not for free, of course." He explained that the Academy's leadership was meddling with his research in the capital, and as Crown Prince, he would help resolve this. The protagonist remained silent, overwhelmed by the prince's words. Soon after, Charlotte, Hachi, and the main character arrived at the designated location for the new laboratory. The dragon happily asked, "Will his research plant be built here?" The protagonist, surprised, wondered how it would be possible to construct his laboratory amid the ongoing interference from the Academy. His sister had arranged everything with a single command, providing a plot of land on their family estate. She had organized the entire process herself. He inquired about the construction progress. Birgit replied that the building was underway, with several skilled builders working diligently. The protagonist asked who these workers were. Charlotte answered that they belonged to the Bulgar Construction Company, hired at the Highness's request. Known throughout the capital for their expertise and strength, they were responsible for constructing the royal palace, and even nobles had to wait years to engage their services. He noted that the work seemed to be proceeding swiftly. Turning to him, Charlotte hesitantly expressed concern that becoming his apprentice might be inconvenient. The protagonist considered her words and, perhaps, thought it might be for the best. Suddenly, one of the builders called out to his superior, reporting an issue. They had encountered a massive bedrock slab. It was so hard that leveling the ground seemed impossible, and any structure built on this spot would be uneven. The foreman responded brusquely, "Stop complaining. They've trained for moments like this, haven't they?" He called on the workers to rally and crush the obstacle with their strengthened muscles. Obediently, the builders launched their assault, beginning to dismantle the slab. The protagonist watched in disbelief, thinking, "That's impossible." After some time, the foreman noted, "They've nearly broken all the tools. Maybe we should consider explosives." The builders objected vehemently, insisting that wouldn't be wise. They were concerned about damaging the yard and nearby trees. Charlotte looked on sympathetically, understanding how tough it was for them. She wished she could easily help. The protagonist reached into his pocket and pulled out a medallion-shaped artifact. Perhaps he could craft a tiny device to form a protective barrier. Turning to the foreman, he asked where the used tools had been placed. The man looked at him with surprise, then pointed out that they were already broken. Understood, the protagonist said quietly. He grabbed a pickaxe and focused his skill. The master craftsman, noticing this, asked what he intended to do. The protagonist explained that he would temper the tool with magical fire and embed a barrier mechanism before the builder's and princess's eyes. Instantly, the ordinary pickaxe transformed into a powerful drilling device. Runner suggested that the builders test it immediately. The craftsman took the tool and, after a brief moment, exclaimed in amazement. He had punched through the rock and the tool was unscathed. "What is this?" he asked. The protagonist explained that he had added a rotating and tilting mechanism to make drilling easier, along with a barrier-protected blade that increased strength and could puncture most materials. He shared that, at present, he could only craft for such devices from one barrier artifact, but he believed that mass production was possible in the future. These tools, he said, could greatly benefit upcoming construction projects. The master, visibly impressed, admitted he didn't understand the mechanics or barriers, but knew one thing for certain. The protagonist was their savior. The man shook his hand firmly, then embraced him so tightly that it was almost overwhelming. The other builders approached, expressing their gratitude with handshakes and pats on the shoulder. Charlotte watched, stunned, a broad smile on her face. The master called out to his workers, urging them to resume construction at full speed, beginning immediately. Soon, the protagonist and his companions admired their finished work. Charlotte exclaimed with admiration, "This is an outstanding laboratory." The builders had completed the task ahead of schedule, making a fine job of it. The protagonist nodded in agreement. The princess, shy but determined, stepped forward and said she wished to ask him once more to take her as his apprentice. Bowing respectfully, she acknowledged his skill and superiority. The protagonist looked at her thoughtfully for a long moment before asking if she could bring water and firewood the following day. Charlotte, surprised, repeated his request. Water and firewood? The protagonist informed her that she would be required for ongoing research. Gratefully, the girl expressed her excitement about the assignment. He reminded her not to forget to bring her guards along. The next morning, the princess, humming happily, set out to complete her task, thrilled at the prospect of Werner becoming her mentor. Her guards walked silently behind her. Suddenly, she overheard one of the guards shouting, "What are you doing?" She turned and saw her guards lying motionless on the sidewalk. Panicked, she rushed to their side, shaking them desperately. "What's wrong? Are they okay? What's happening?" Before she could understand, a disfigured dean grabbed her from behind, muffling her screams, and forced her into an alleyway. The academy's director, furious, exclaimed, "That worthless fool has a student. This is utterly ridiculous." Then, with a sinister smile, he added, "Well, she might as well be useful for revenge." He told the dean they shouldn't kill her yet, that she would serve as bait. Both men chuckled darkly. Meanwhile, the protagonist was cleaning Hachi's mouth after feeding her, when a guard burst in with urgent news. Charlotte had been kidnapped, and they were chasing two criminals connected to the attack on the guards, though their whereabouts remained unknown. One of the guards handed him a note, stating that if Werner wished to save his student, he should meet them. Hachi's eyes widened in alarm. This was dire, he had to go immediately. Yet Werner insisted, "No, I'll go alone." Hachi tried to persuade him otherwise, but Werner firmly explained that he had a lead on the kidnappers and needed to make sure the guards did not act rashly. Werner then headed to the former experimental wing of the Academy of Sages. Upon entering loudly, he announced his arrival. The director and dean appeared, holding Charlotte hostage. The dean scoffed sarcastically, "So he shows up just as they planned. Despite his foolishness, he can still read a letter." Werner responded grimly, "This is their doing." The director snapped angrily, "The girl is of no use anymore. They're giving her back to him." With force, he pushed the princess so hard she nearly fell, but Werner caught her. The dean then pointed an artifact at them, releasing a deadly magical force and commanding them to die. He aimed a blow at Werner, but the latter swiftly activated a magical barrier, forming a protective dome around them. Observing the artifact, the dean sneered, "Looks like a magical artifact. He would have been better off dying here with his student." Werner remarked that their magic had advanced considerably. The dean scowled, telling him to shut his revolting mouth. Since leaving their academy, their plans had spiraled into chaos, one failure after another. They had once swindled a group of naive merchants who looked down on them, and in the end, paid the price with mutilated bodies. The director's voice was tinged with anger as he recounted this history. "All because of him," he muttered. "Those fools who did this claimed they would restore them to their original forms if they killed him, so they decided to let him die for their own sake. They believed it would serve as a lesson, and afterward, they'd release his student." The protagonist listened in disbelief, failing to understand their reasoning. It was clear this was just an attempt to shift blame onto him. A surge of hatred from the dean urged him to remain silent. He resolved to ensure that Filthy Tongue would never mock again. Both figures activated their dark magic powers simultaneously. The dean told Werner that he had personally refined the magical artifacts they possessed. Now, he was determined to test how long he could safeguard his student against their assault. They launched an attack on their allies, but the protagonist was prepared. He stepped forward slightly, unleashing a fierce counterattack on his enemies. After successfully neutralizing their magic, Werner remarked that the dean had tinkered with the artifacts he had left in the laboratory. He noted their deficiencies, explaining that their connections had weakened under high stress, and with enough force, they could even be broken with bare hands. Such cheap tricks wouldn't work on him. Moving back to the princess, he stood beside her and expressed curiosity about their increasing magical power. He hoped they would surrender without a fight. At that moment, the academy's director and the dean activated a grappling mechanism. Thick ropes swiftly ensnared both the princess and Werner. The protagonist realized they had initiated it. The dean exclaimed gleefully, "Just immobilize him, and this device will handle the rest." With these words, he cast aside a cloak from a powerful firing device. Charlotte screamed in fear. "What is this?" the protagonist asked, activating his protective barrier as he saw their intentions. The villainous lot sneered and insulted the barrier, claiming, "It's all useless." He pressed a button, and the device erupted with a stream of shock aura, causing the barrier to disintegrate. To his surprise, the director smugly told him that, although Werner was undoubtedly an excellent artifact mage, without his tools, he was nothing more than a weakling. They had prepared this trap precisely for that moment. The director illuminated the center of the device, revealing a familiar crystal. Elle, filled with anger, exclaimed, "This is a magical medical device designed to extract magic from the environment. It's meant for patients unable to channel magic themselves. It's his invention." He was aware of its flaw. This device not only absorbed magic from the air but also drew endlessly from nearby magical instruments. The protagonist had to modify it to release the stored magic instead of draining it continuously. If charged to its full capacity, it could deliver a blow more devastating than the flames of an ancient dragon. Did its creator truly understand the extent of its power? The protagonist gazed silently at the figure before him, offering no response. Charlotte's face mirrored her fear and confusion, unsure of what was unfolding. Elle continued, revealing that now that the protagonist was unable to wield magical tools, he was entirely helpless and condemning him and his student to meet their fate. With a sinister smile, the dean activated a formidable weapon, aiming a devastating attack at the hero and the princess. In a split second, the protagonist shielded the young girl, positioning himself as a barrier against the incoming assault. Meanwhile, the director and Elle watched as flames consumed the hated Werner and his disciple, their expressions filled with perverse glee. The director exulted, "At last, they've finished him. This weapon is extraordinary. With it, no one can oppose us." The dean, bowing in deference, echoed, "Indeed," as a useful test subject. The protagonist's resourcefulness had proven unexpectedly valuable. Turning to L, he inquired about his well-being. Then, extinguishing the flames, he stepped out of the fiery inferno and imparted a lesson. Lesson 1. Those who create magical artifacts are the true pioneers in making magic accessible to all. Their creators must be capable of using magic independently, without reliance on the artifacts they craft. He then demonstrated his own power by activating a protective barrier once more. Charlotte clung to him, trembling with fear. The director and dean could scarcely believe their eyes. How was this possible? Creators of magical artifacts are supposed to be inept, incapable of wielding magic. Yet this individual possessed such a powerful barrier spell. The protagonist explained, "It's for research. I learned it to better understand magic. But more importantly, I still don't know what exactly caused our powers to surge. Could it be the artifact embedded on our foreheads? I don't know where they obtained it, but I intend to investigate thoroughly after I defeat them." Their astonishment only grew. The director, furious, sneered, "A worthless loser who has no idea of his proper place." Ordering Lot to use their secret item, he emphasized the gravity of the situation. The dean hesitated, warning that using the artifact might prevent them from regaining their original forms. The director cut him off sharply, threatening to kill him if he refused. Shaking with fear, Lot reluctantly took out an unknown substance, and they began transforming into monstrous forms. The director roared in triumph, "Excellent! We should have started with this from the beginning. With such power, they'll crush this fool like a fly." Meanwhile, the protagonist, shielding the princess with a protective hand, cast a tense glance at his adversaries. The director predicted that everything was about to change dramatically. The hero wondered what form these creatures would take after consuming the substance. Suddenly, the director invoked magic, unleashing several fireballs toward the protagonist. As the battle escalated, the protagonist sensed that his magical power had increased multiple times, preparing himself for the fight ahead. The director considered the situation and remarked that things were not entirely hopeless, yet he emphasized the need to push forward. The dean concurred, and suddenly, both of them ascended into the air. The dean announced a plan to expand the mana absorber's range, noting the location was a certain restaurant in the capital. He also mentioned that the fire had been extinguished. However, something had broken the central street of the city, and he inquired about the streetlights. Birgit reported that all of them had gone out. He then pointed out that the magical artifacts throughout the heart of the city had ceased functioning entirely, inflicting catastrophic damage on the capital. The prince was taken aback and demanded an explanation of what was happening. Suddenly, a beam of white light emanated from a crystal, causing the main character to wonder whether their mana had been drained from the entire city. He questioned the barrier once more, pondering if it could still offer protection. But he was left pondering, what was the point? He wanted clarification. The director asked if he was missing the gravity of the situation. They intended to strike the entire city, and they saw his barrier. The dean admitted that his shield couldn't encompass the whole capital. Memories flooded the main character about how he had used his shield before. If the entire city's mana was released in an instant, his barrier would be useless, but they could show mercy. Yet he was told that killing him was the only way to prevent total destruction. At that moment, Charlotte stood behind him, her face contorted with horror. The director, with a crazy smile, told them that they had promised not to attack the capital if he died. So he faced a choice. He then activated his shield and asked if that was his response. The figure nodded and he accepted. In that instant, he unleashed the full extent of their magic, declaring that the capital underestimated their power and was nothing but an eyesore. They would all be reduced to ashes and vanish completely. Without hesitation, he launched a barrage of fireballs toward the city. A voice echoed, adjusting coordinates, duplicating barrier on the same plane, moving along the axis 80, 90, 100, 110, total 1,500 layers, purifying. The main character judged that this should be sufficient. His barrier swiftly covered the entire capital, causing all the incoming fireballs, emanating from the director and dean, to collide harmlessly with his shield. He questioned the impossibility of such a feat. How could a barrier hold so much? The answer was that, based on the terrain data, he could position his barrier anywhere he wished. He hadn't done so earlier simply because it hadn't been necessary. Only a mage of the highest caliber, perhaps an archmage, could achieve such a feat, the main character explained. He then asked what the director was talking about. The creator claimed he couldn't be worse than his own creations, which prompted the director to curse him and insist on repeating his plan, to gather more mana from the entire city once again. But suddenly, something went wrong. They were knocked aside by an unseen force. The director explained that if the magic stone absorbed too much mana, it would lose control, indiscriminately drawing from all surrounding sources. He concluded that the project had been abandoned because of this critical flaw. The director then cursed him with bitterness. The main character gazed at him intently before casting a spell to expand his mana. He instructed him to move quickly, warning that staying was too dangerous. He urged him to simply leave the area without hesitation. The other responded with defiance, insisting he should leave himself. Without delay, the main character activated his disintegration skill, asserting that if they failed to take action, the situation would only worsen, leaving no choice but to eliminate the threat. At that moment, he launched an attack, and both opponents collapsed to the ground, untouched and uninjured. Exhaling deeply, the main character looked over the fallen figures, then brushed dust from his hands and turned away. He sensed the absorbed mana had dispersed back into the city's core. Turning to Charlotte, he admitted he had put her in danger. Concerned, he asked if she was hurt. She reassured him with a gentle hug, expressing relief that he was unscathed and emphasizing how worried she had been. Hadi, calling out to her, embraced the main character too, confirming his safety. The main character remarked that she had finally arrived, prompting a guard to apologize for being late. He wondered if these were Prince Klaus's soldiers. The guard explained that the prince had dispatched a team to assist him, but it seemed he had managed on his own. He requested permission to accompany him to the castle to clarify the situation. The main character glanced at the battlefield, pondering whether that was what they referred to. Slightly uncomfortable, he admitted he urgently needed to dismantle a magical artifact. The guard standing nearby assured him they had strict orders to escort him to the castle regardless of circumstances, as His Highness eagerly awaited his arrival. Frustrated, the main character doubted he'd avoid trouble from this interference. Once they reached the castle, the prince bowed respectfully before the main character and expressed sincere gratitude. Confused, he asked what for. The prince explained he was grateful primarily for saving the princess and for defending the royal capital. The main character considered that the prince wasn't angry, which was a relief. He mentioned that the director and dean had already gained a bad reputation and were now detained on charges of treason, facing life imprisonment. The main character nodded, realizing the gravity of the situation, and apologized for causing so much trouble. The prince dismissed it, saying it was no concern. Then he inquired whether the main character was familiar with the magical artifacts they carried. The main character responded that they resembled the one worn by the ancient dragon, but noted that this particular artifact could turn its users into demons, a more refined and dangerous version. The prince asked if he could craft a similar artifact. The main character shook his head, explaining that it was beyond his current abilities, and he had no plans to develop such powerful objects. Disappointed, the prince acknowledged this, noting that their investigation indicated the culprits were tied to a group allied with the Galatea Empire, wielding advanced artifacts even a master mage could not replicate. Looking up, he asked, "Is there such a genius on the enemy side?" He considered how they had been defeated with such ease, realizing this opponent was far more dangerous than they had believed. It seemed they had underestimated the threat. They had already taken their next step, and this time, their goal was to eliminate him entirely, especially since they possessed the Child of Light. 2 days after the incident, the main character slowly regained consciousness. He inquired whether it was already morning. After a brief conversation with His Highness, he returned to his research and soon fell asleep again. Suddenly, he sensed a presence beside him on the bed and asked, "What is that?" Unexpectedly, A scream erupted from beneath the blanket. He swiftly pulled away the cover and saw Charlotte and Haiti. Charlotte immediately shouted, "What was that? Why is she naked?" The main character urged her to stay calm. Haiti suggested that everyone should sleep together, which made the main character wonder if it was her idea. Haiti explained that ancient dragons tend to cuddle during sleep. She then asked, "But why are they both naked?" Charlotte quickly told the protagonist that he shouldn't look at her, and he nodded in understanding, turning away. He remarked on her quick change of attitude. Haiti, observing the scene, took hold of them and suggested they stay closer to each other. Charlotte screamed again, protesting that she had already told Haiti this was inappropriate for humans. Just then, Berg entered the room and called for the main character. She asked, "What's all that screaming about? Is everything all right?" Her eyes widened in shock when she saw the three of them undressed on the bed. She was certain he had been attacked again, but knew things had only become more complicated. He spent some time explaining the situation to his sister in detail. Sitting at the table, Berg remarked that it was merely a misunderstanding and hoped it wouldn't happen again. The main character, relieved, exhaled slowly. Charlotte, blushing, felt embarrassed about the situation. Berg then mentioned that she had recently received a letter from the academy. They had elected a new rector and made changes in the magical artifacts department, and now they wanted to invite him. The main character harbored some unpleasant memories of the academy but remained intrigued by the prospect of seeing how the artifacts he had left behind were doing. He admitted that the person who had perfected his creations had not yet been found. Haiti agreed and suggested that they all go together, fearing potential complications. Charlotte supported this idea. Berg added that she also had urgent matters near the academy, so she would accompany them. When asked about her business, Berg replied that she needed to conduct a border inspection. The main character said she need not do it herself. Berg responded that the title of Margrave had been passed down through her family for generations, and it was her duty as the future head of the family to carry out such responsibilities. The protagonist paused for a moment before deciding to take the item with him. From his pocket, he withdrew an amulet, an artifact designed to create protective barriers, and also a device intended for communication. He warned her to remain cautious. Burette nodded in agreement, urging him to be careful as well. She then mentioned that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and expressed gratitude for his arrival. The new head of the Sage Academy, Fiona Rentledge, was introduced. She admitted she hadn't expected to meet him again. In response, he revealed that he had been appointed as the Academy's new director. She greeted the news positively. He praised her reputation as a brilliant scientist and a skilled teacher, believing she was the best fit for the position. Fiona adjusted her glasses and added that many at the Academy, herself included, had voiced opposition to his dismissal. Despite their objections, the former director had acted according to his own wishes. Her clenched fist betrayed her anger as she declared that if given the chance, she would have taken matters into her own hands. Seeking to ease her frustration, he suggested that what had happened was in the past and wondered if she intended to return his artifacts. She looked at him and asked whether he planned to accompany her. They were heading to a specific location, and she insisted that superficial apologies or dismissals would no longer suffice. Approaching the door, she implied that they needed to be there for a reason, and once inside, she hoped the visit might at least serve as some form of amends. He glanced around and recognized his lab, assuming that everything of importance had been discarded. Fiona explained that she had observed how poorly they had treated him that day. Their protests had been ignored, so she decided to at least preserve his remaining belongings and returned all the artifacts the previous director had confiscated. Bowing deeply, she once again apologized, acknowledging it might be too late to mend everything. Then she asked if he would like to continue his research at the academy. They needed him, she said, offering to double his salary and ensure prompt answers to any questions, thanks to her influential position. However, he cut her off, firmly declining to return. Fiona looked surprised and asked for his reasons. He explained hesitantly that he didn't hold a grudge against the academy, but he preferred to conduct his research freely, without restrictions. Additionally, he would soon be busy training his student. At that moment, his gaze fell on Charlotte, who was cradling Hottie in her arms. Fiona exhaled softly and expressed understanding, respecting his decision. She assured him that his place at the academy would remain open. He could return any time, give lectures, or assist with research if he wished. He expressed his gratitude. Suddenly, Hottie jumped onto Fiona's head and squealed her thanks. Fiona looked up at her and smiled, remarking that she was the baby he was caring for. The little one joyfully confirmed, "I am Hottie." She served her master diligently, while Fiona appeared utterly captivated by her cuteness, as if struck by an electric shock. She asked Fiona if she wanted candy, prompting the girl to reply that she liked everything adorable. The main character noted that Fiona's tastes favored all things charming. Then she remarked, "By the way, the laboratory has been beautifully restored." Fiona nodded and said that they had helped her with the work. At that moment, Keel reached out via communication, mentioning it had been a long time since they last saw each other. The main character called him, and he turned to introduce her, saying he was her former student. Keel bowed politely, expressing his pleasure at their meeting and mentioning that he'd been assisting in the restoration of the cherished laboratory. The main character inquired if he was currently working for Eugene and whether the director had contacted him. Keel confirmed this but added that his current assignment involved designing a merchant ship powered by magic stones. Unfortunately, these stones were scarce, and he was searching for sources to obtain more. He had already gathered about half of what he needed, but the stones suitable for ship propulsion were exceedingly rare and costly. Hattie eagerly suggested splitting the stones to create more, but Charlotte pointed out that the process was far more complex. Damaging a magic stone caused it to turn to dust, and even breaking it would diminish the stored mana. Keel briefly lost heart, explaining that many researchers had tried to prevent this loss but had yet to succeed. The main character disagreed, stating that he believed otherwise. He examined the stone closely and declared it was indeed a magic stone. Then, he took his tools and prepared to split it. Watching him, Keel became frightened and asked what he was doing, fearing the stone would be destroyed. To everyone's surprise, the main character succeeded in splitting the stone. Keel looked at the fragments and asked why they hadn't crumbled. The main character explained that inside a magic stone resides a core, the origin of the mana, and veins through which mana flows. If one strikes the veins without hitting the core, the stone remains intact. The veins generally run downward, he said, sharing this insight from his initial attempt at splitting such stones. Interestingly, both fragments tend to try restoring their original shape, a phenomenon worth studying later. More importantly, each fragment contains an identical mana core, effectively making the broken pieces just as potent as the whole. Keel described what the core was, and the main character held the two fragments, stating that from a single stone they could produce two. Keel observed that the mana glow appeared unchanged. The main character then pointed out that this method could double their supply of magic stones. Until now, these stones had only powered ships as auxiliary energy sources, but eventually, they could become the primary power source. Ships utilizing magic stones would require fewer sails and carry much greater cargo capacity. Keel added that magic stones powered not only ships but also many artifacts throughout the capital, emphasizing their vital role. The discovery held the potential to significantly influence the economy, yet the main character had not encountered this method anywhere else until now. Curious, he asked his teacher where he had learned about it. The teacher replied that he had uncovered this knowledge only yesterday. This revelation surprised Cole, who was present. The main character mentioned that such a feat could only be achieved once using a magic stone. Cole's excitement grew as he realized that this meant twice as many stones could be utilized, which might hold the key to resolving energy shortages. Deeply grateful, he bowed and expressed his thanks, confident that everything was now set for success. He had initially intended to visit him, but once again, his own problems took precedence. The main character gently placed a hand on Cole's shoulder and assured him he would stop by occasionally. Though he had graduated, he was still his student in spirit. If anything was unclear, he could always turn to him for guidance. Cole's face lit up at these words, filled with happiness. Fiona watched the exchange quietly and remarked that it was a significant loss. His insight and leadership qualities were on par with those of the first investigator. She acknowledged his talents but added that a role merely as a professor seemed too limited for someone of his caliber. Afterward, they left the academy, Hattie carrying a bag full of sweets whose owner said they had received many treats. The main character held a box in his hands and explained that his artifacts had been returned. He was pleased to have recovered everything, as Charlotte mentioned that he had crafted numerous artifacts, something that had become almost a daily routine. Just yesterday he had completed another. Out of his pocket he pulled a magical artifact. Charlotte asked what it was, and he explained that it was a device sending distress signals. During his experiments, he had observed that magic stones split from resonating had a unique interaction. He decided to explore this property further. That morning, he had given one such artifact to his sister, which contained barrier magic. When she invested her mana into it, resonance would occur, causing the stone to glow. Suddenly, the artifact lit up brightly before shattering completely. The main character examined it and deduced that the glowing indicated his sister had infused her mana into the stone. He questioned why it had broken and if his sister's stone had been destroyed. His concern deepened about her safety. Meanwhile, his sister was riding in a carriage, noting that everything had gone according to plan. It was fortunate she hadn't actually needed to use the artifact after all. However, she sensed a powerful magic energy nearby and became alert. Suddenly, their carriage was attacked. Birgit was knocked down by the impact, and the magical artifact his brother had given her was damaged. He called out to her, asking if she was injured. She helped him to his feet and reassured him she was all right. Birgit stood up suddenly, sensing again the faint flicker of magical energy. In that moment, 2 more shots rang out, prompting her to raise a protective spell. She was caught off guard by a sudden attack. Several fireballs hurtled from the bushes. She managed to conjure a magical shield, but not before sustaining injuries. Blood seeped from her wounds, and she realized the bleeding wouldn't stop. Her assistant urgently urged her to summon a healer. He nodded, emphasizing the need to safeguard her first. Approaching carefully, he identified himself as a healer and requested she dispel her barrier so he could assist. Birgit deduced that the attack had been launched with a spell resembling a spear, and if enemies struck again, she would sense their mana, allowing her to anticipate the assault. She nodded in agreement and gave him permission to begin healing. As she lowered her magical barrier, her first priority was to stem the bleeding. Suddenly, a knife hurtled into her hand. She initially thought it was merely a blade, and she managed to block the attack. Immediately afterward, a protective barrier appeared, surrounding them. The moment the barrier formed, it deactivated, and from the shadows of the bushes, multiple attempts were made to strike her again. She was on the verge of injury once more, but a large, shimmering barrier suddenly materialized around them. Birgit glanced at it and recognized it as her own protective spell. She called out to the main character, who arrived a moment later, apologizing for his delay. He ordered the healer to treat his sister immediately, which the healer acknowledged without hesitation. The main character spotted the attacker and directed Hadi to move toward them. Meanwhile, someone from the bushes launched another assault, but the main character observed little reaction from his opponent. When the smoke from his last attack cleared, he announced that his foe had managed to escape, confident it would be difficult to track them down. At that moment, he stepped on something and called out, "Is that a letter?" The note warned him to cease meddling, or bloodshed would only intensify. Later, at the mansion of the Marjorie family, the main character inquired about his sister's condition. She said the treatment had been successful and requested a private conversation. The main character agreed to stay for a while. Stepping inside, he greeted his sister, who was bandaged from head to toe. He asked about her wounds, and she assured him she'd recover after some rest. Thanks to his artifact, they had managed to provide first aid quickly. He marveled at his inventions, considering them extraordinary. Her role required her to monitor foreign activities, yet she admitted her efforts had fallen short, allowing enemies to catch her. The main character reassured her not to worry and encouraged her to continue her research. At that moment, she looked at him and asked if he was going to ignore her warning. He remained silent, listening carefully. Birgit then said, "Fine, I'll tell you what I know." As she had begun investigating an organization called the Cult of the God of Light. Recently, various strange incidents had been occurring across the region, sparking their concern. The cult was plotting to overthrow the emperor, with rumors suggesting their neighbors, the Galatea Empire, might be involved. The main character inquired whether this was true of the leadership, to which Birgit responded that the cult's involvement was a real possibility. The government remained vigilant due to previous incidents, yet no solid clues had emerged. This implied they could have an insider aiding the cult within their borders. From her investigation, she believed Harold was the most likely suspect. As the head of a trading enterprise, he maintained close ties with the academy. Recently, his business had been unusually successful, and he had been gathering magical artifacts. When suspicious activities drew attention, the Crown Prince dispatched knights to his premises, only to find the trading house completely deserted. The manipulators had exploited the director and dean for their own ends, which disrupted the company's operations and hampered the cult's influence within the empire. She considered their attack a warning signal. The protagonist nodded thoughtfully, expressing his understanding and gratitude, and advised her to rest. Yet Birgit urgently called him aside to warn that the attackers truly intended to kill her and that he must not act recklessly. If he sensed danger, he was to leave immediately. The protagonist agreed and departed. Charlotte then inquired about his sister's well-being, to which he assured her she was safe and not at risk. Both needed to rest that day. He started to insist on moving forward, but Charlotte hesitated, ready to object. The main character cut her off, insisting everything was fine and urging them to proceed. Later, he was in his laboratory trying to repair the artifact. He determined he would have to find it himself. Hadi approached and warned him that ancient dragons possessed acute hearing. She had overheard their conversation and sensed that their scent was nearby. She volunteered to help, confident she could locate the dragons through their smell. The main character hesitated, cautioning that the opponent was dangerous and he preferred her to stay safe. She explained that ancient dragons also had an exceptional sense of smell and could track them more effectively by scent. She wanted to be useful. He exhaled deeply, acknowledging the necessity of returning to the crime scene to catch the culprit before he escaped. They would track him by the blood scent. Meanwhile, back at the palace, the main character lamented his failure to eliminate Birgit. He summoned the herald, demanding to know what he was doing there. The Crown Prince's army was already everywhere, making his plan to dismantle the empire from within seem futile. The herald expressed remorse but reaffirmed his commitment. He warned that another failure would cost him his life, reminding him that his soldiers had been entrusted to him because of his rank as an officer. The herald's thoughts darkened as he considered the others. Just a bunch of fools relying on artifacts and the power of the Child of Light to succeed. Their incompetence now threatened everything. He rose to his feet and declared, "Well, with their soldiers." By then, he had also acquired a magical artifact of immense power. He believed that a combat relic crafted by the Child of Light possessed the strength of ancient dragons. Such an artifact alone could level an entire nation. With it, even the Crown Prince's army would pose little threat. He envisioned the empire's collapse, leading the Galatia Empire and the Ramit Kingdom to declare war, an opportunity for enormous riches. Selling magical artifacts to both sides would make him wealthy beyond measure. He'd be content if the protagonist ceased bothering him, but he refused to let this threat go unchallenged. At that moment, he called out to the protagonist. The herald turned to him, asking what all the commotion was about. The herald appeared puzzled and replied, "There's someone outside." Suddenly, a figure kicked down the door. The main character apologized and explained they refused entry. It was indeed the herald.